Oh man, Tennessee could have a big problem on its hands when it gets to Georgia, and ETSU might be the last chance to get a couple of things ironed out. And I'm talking about the injuries to the secondary. It kind of has Tennessee in a bit of a vulnerable spot. But let's get into it. I'm Paige Dauer. This is the sports page on Full Disclosure. Back in January, 24/7 Sports reported that Tennessee is the only program with two of the conference's top 8 cover cornerbacks returning in the conference. That's a pretty sweet spot to be.
No timetable on him.
Make sure you mark your calendars for Fridays at 8:30 this fall. VFL Todd Kelly Jr. is joining the program for Live Ball, where we'll preview all of Tennessee's upcoming games. You could watch us here on YouTube or join us in person, better yet, at Harper Volkswagen. Maybe free tickets might be in the mix this season, but you won't know if you don't show up. So have your calendars marked, turn your notifications on. So yeah, it's a sweet spot to be if you're Tennessee. But then you realize, oh wait, the one of those cornerbacks, he got injured in January. He tore his ACL, and maybe if we're lucky, Tennessee's like, maybe if we're lucky, he'll come back for Georgia. And you could go to, week 1 in those warm-ups against Syracuse. Here he is, playing ball or catch with Boo Carter. He looks kind of comfortable and relaxed, but kind of in a mix of like street clothes still. You could go to the very end of fall camp that was open up to media, and he wasn't 100% full speed by any means, but he certainly was involved in the drills. He was certainly taking contact, and he was having sharper cuts in his drills. So that would signal to me that his knee's getting a little healthier. So I would imagine that his return is a little bit sooner than later. But then in that same game against Syracuse, what happens early in the game? It's Rickey Gibson who goes down with an injury. It's confirmed earlier this week that he's going to miss some significant time.
Rickey will be out for an extended period here.
Yeah, so one of the best cornerback duos in the country last season is all but a scratch for week 2. And for sake of argument, they're probably a scratch for week 3, unless Jermon McCoy, knocks off some rust in week 2, which would be an incredible return. Less than a year later from tearing your ACL, you're back out, game ready. I do think they certainly would want him, especially with the injury to Rickey Gibson, to be out on the field against Georgia. And that's what has me a little bit worried for this game. My concern level maybe is just creeping up a little bit. But maybe what's preventing me from pulling the alarm, sounding the alarm, is the fact that they've got Colton Hood, which I know a lot of people were really high on him coming out of, Colorado, where he played behind the eventual Heisman winner and Travis Hunter, but still kind of was under the radar, right? Like, you think coming and getting him out of the portal, it would be a really good fit to have him, kind of be a placeholder for Jermon McCoy. But the way he performed against Syracuse, that was somebody who took full advantage of his opportunity. He collected the season's first SEC Co-Defensive Player of the Week honor, and part of that is because of a couple of great things that he did. His 3 PBUs he had in that game, it was the most amongst any player in the SEC in week 1. His scoop and score was the first by a Vols since 2023. So he was really able to take advantage of the opportunity he had, and it's more impressive when you consider that he committed to Tennessee May 2nd. He didn't have the full summer. He had, full fall camp, and he really relied on his teammates like Jermon McCoy to help get him up to speed so that he could capitalize on his opportunity. And maybe while it was kind of a surprise to me, in full disclosure, it kind of was, maybe I underrated him just a little bit. Didn't have a gigantic sample size from Colorado, but I think Tennessee is very underrated in their ability to get diamonds in the rough out of the portal. So when you hear Heupel after the game say that he was not surprised at all by Colton Hood's performance, you start to understand why.
He's smart, he's competitive, cares about the people around him, great teammate. It was great to see him go out there and, obviously make a huge play in the football game.
Maybe just like a little bit more context into the player that Tennessee was getting in Colton Hood out of Colorado. I mean, you obviously weren't the starting cornerback. You were playing behind Travis Hunter, but you did have some good opportunities. And according to PFF, he played 215 coverage snaps, allowed 0 touchdowns, and held quarterbacks to about a 51.7 passer rating. Pretty good spot to be. Then you go to how he looked in the game against Syracuse. They gave him a 75.4 grade, which is starter quality according to how they judge their scale. But obviously take all of that with a grain of salt. But when you consider what he was able to do at Arizona, how he kind of shut down Syracuse and their, passing game, which is something that he had done before. I mean, you could go to his first career start, which was against Arizona, and they held the eventual number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft, and McMillan to 5 catches for like 38 yards. So when you consider, he actually does a pretty good job back there. He looked pretty good week 1. It kind of all goes and confirms what he really prides himself in.
Y'all think is the best guy, I'm going to go out there and do what I do and lock him down.
But a key reason why I think Tennessee won't have a dip in production with Colton Hood back there, either as a placeholder for Jamal McCoy or is just somewhere out on the field. Every time he's out there, snap after snap, I guarantee it, they'll get 100% effort out of Colton Hood. And I think, when we consider everyone else in week one, getting 100% effort out of a player seems to be the most premium quality that you could get out of a player. I mean, just look at the Alabama Crimson Tide against FSU. Where was their effort? But then you could go to the flip side and you could look to South Carolina and Virginia Tech. Effort by South Carolina absolutely swung the momentum of that game in the fourth quarter. So having somebody play with effort like that, or, the wide receiver and that essential pancake block in the Oregon game, you want somebody that plays with effort, whether it's, the right tackle or not. To have somebody that can play with 100% effort is probably the most valuable trait that you could have out of a player.
Colton's come in. He's handled himself with great maturity, blended into the fabric of the culture of our football team extremely quickly.
Yeah, so when you have somebody that really has cemented themselves a part of the program, has true identity with the orange and white, I think that kind of corroborates why Heupel said, we're not surprised by Colton Hood's performance. And when I asked their position coach and Willie Martinez, what do you think led Heupel to say that? What are you seeing during practice that would lead you guys to not be surprised?
High energy. Locked in, really good with the players, his teammates, fits in right away.
What I also find important, and if you paid attention, you heard Colton Hood say it just a second ago, it's the fact that he learned multiple positions. He's a very versatile player, and I think that's also partly why the talent that we saw in week one will contribute to the reality that I really firmly believe Colton Hood will be on the field for a majority of the snaps, maybe not always on the right field as the cornerback, but I think the talent that he has, you can't afford to not have him on the field. Sometimes he's those players that makes coaches find them, forces them to find them a permanent home on the field. And I think because he came in here, he wanted to learn a lot. He wanted to be well versed in the defense. He wanted to be somebody that could be a plug and play type of player. I think that will have him be someone who sees a lot of playing time, especially when he plays with the right mentality.
I'm VFL Chris Brown. Experience the VW brand proudly being produced in the great state of Tennessee. Harper Volkswagen is a proud partner of Tennessee Athletics. Go Vols.
So my concern level is kind of kind of just going like that. I'm not picking too much. I'm not dipping too low. But if Colton Hood has me going up a little bit, what has me going down a little bit is ETSU. And not because I think Tennessee's going to dog walk ETSU. I think it's because when you look at the last handful of seasons, they're really not a pass-heavy team. They really are dominated by their run game in seasons where it's a little bit more even. The passing game only has a few more yards over the total yardage of the run game season to season. I think their closest season was in 2024, and it was 2,300 rushing yards and it was 2,500 passing yards. So not much of a difference, but you go to their first game of 2025 and it's 392 yards on the ground and 180 through the air. So they aren't going to necessarily give Tennessee the looks that they would want, kind of how Syracuse did when it comes to the passing game, because this is really the last tune-up game. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, it should be. Tennessee should be a program that is able to make this a non-competitive game if they take care of business, and I looked how they did in week one. I also don't know how much ETSU will test the secondary because their leading receiver from last year, and A.J. Johnson, transferred to UAB. So maybe we'll see that in a couple of weeks, but we're not going to see that this week. And then obviously the numbers that I just mentioned, I'm not really sure Tennessee will have the true advantage when it goes to SEC play. But then when you look to Rickey Gibson, so I'm dipping a little bit because of matchups with ETSU, and I'm dipping a little bit more because of matchups with Ty Redmond, the true freshman. He had a phenomenal game against Syracuse. In fact, PFF actually graded him slightly higher than Colton Hood in his overall production. Had a couple tackles, had a couple PBUs, and it all kind of goes back to his recruiting efforts from Josh Heupel and company. And I think maybe that's why he was ready to have the game that he did, because he, in his mind, always had the mentality of practicing like you're the number one.
My preparation throughout the week got me to that point, I didn't expect to play that many reps, but when you prepare right, then and you go perform out like that, and that's what happens.
So then you hear him talk, and I'm like, nah, I'm going to go back up a little bit. Kind of, it's just like a little wave, I think, is kind of what's going on. And I don't think necessarily anything has me going down too far, but maybe what has me coming up a little bit is, obviously the fact that he was preparing like he was the starter. He went out there, had a really good game, but also, it's that same mentality where it's like, that's still a lot of pressure, right? Like one of the nation's best tandem cornerbacks aren't out there. How will you and Colton Hood look together? Will you guys be able to be as locked down as them? How are you handling the pressure, the opportunity? And what I think is really nice out of a true freshman is that he doesn't see it as like a pressure situation.
There's no pressure when you prepare the right way, week in, week out, you just stick to your details, stick to your technique. There will never be no pressure.
It's a small sample size for the both of them, and they both were stellar in their first opportunity, and it's great when your sample size is things of, the positive nature. But where Tennessee lacked, especially in that first game against Syracuse, and I'm sure Georgia watches that film and they're thinking maybe if it's the same duo, week through 3, they could probably get away with that. Tennessee really struggled on those late downs. They had Syracuse had 8 explosive plays through the air. 3 of them came on late downs, and they were 20 plus yards as well. So being able to, whether it starts with your linebackers or it's, really back with your secondary with the cornerbacks, Tennessee has got to do a better job of limiting those explosive plays on late downs, let alone just giving up fourth down conversions. They've got to limit explosive plays on those third and fourth down conversions. And hopefully they can tighten that up against ETSU so that the new cornerback duo that, for sake of argument, will be there for Georgia, will be able to kind of hold their own back there. But I wouldn't be surprised if if Jermon McCoy is ready to go for week 3, and maybe Colton Hood and Ty Redmond split reps on the left side of the field, or, maybe Colton Hood's on the field somewhere else. But I do think it creates a really interesting argument. I think we'll have a much better idea of what this team looks like after a second week. How consistent can they be is probably the main point. Not necessarily are you going up there and getting another scoop and score, but are you playing with good fundamentals? Are you assignment savvy? All of that will be important on tape when they get ready for the Georgia week. But concern level is probably just, a little bit of a wave. It's not dipping too much. I think, if we find out a little bit more about Jermon McCoy, maybe after this game, maybe it'll go up a little bit more. But if he's definitely still a game time decision, let's probably say, my concern might be a little bit deeper. But live ball Fridays, 8:30 in the morning, live here on YouTube or live in person at Harper Volkswagen. Please make sure you mark your calendars, and we'll be back with so much more. Nate Met joining the program on Thursday as well. So definitely make sure you have your notifications on and you are subscribed, and I'll talk to you guys later this week.